as Eric kind of mentioned, what we'll be talking about today is, it is a challenging one, and he gave the challenging one to me, of course. Pretty standard, but no. So we're going to be covering Romans 1, verses 18 through 25. And kind of before I get started, I'm actually going to ask. Carol came all the way from Tipton this morning just to read this for us today. That was it. She's actually going back after she reads it. No, she's not. But yeah, if you want to come up and read, that'd be great. You want the microphone?
I'm loud enough. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
The reading this morning is from Romans chapter 1, verses 18 to 25. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who suppresses the truth in unrighteousness, because that may be known of God is manifest to them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible men, and birds, and four-footed animals, and creeping things. Therefore God also gave them up to uncleanness in the lusts of their hearts, to dishonour their bodies amongst themselves, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much for that, Carol. So, kind of before I kind of got started looking at this, it gave me this kind of commentary for kind of the Old Testament and the New Testament. And it goes into fantastic detail, and you could probably do it's kind of like one book for the New Testament, one book for the Old Testament. And I remember talking with him, and he said, "Oh, you can get commentaries that have multiple volumes just for individual books, and you could probably do a sermon on each one of these verses that Carol just read out for us, but I will do my best to kind of unpack a little bit. So what I'm going to be talking about today is essentially what Paul's talking about here is essentially God's reasons for the condemnation of the sinfulness of mankind. And so what I'll be doing is I'll be unpacking a few of those reasons, kind of giving a little bit about the results of this condemnation, what the inevitable outcome is of all this. But first, what I'll do is I'll set a little bit of context for this. So as we've already kind of stated, today's topic is we are fallen. Ever since Adam and Eve chose to go down that road, we have been fallen, and it's kind of important to note that everything that we read in the Bible was relevant 2,000 years ago, and it's relevant today. It's all of these things, and I'll kind of unpack that a little bit, but everything that was written about 2,000 years ago, we actually still see today. In general, despite what people may think or what some people may try and argue, I think the root nature of people have not changed in 2,000 years. So, in kind of a little bit of research about this, kind of the overarching context of kind of who is being spoken about here is essentially the pagans from kind of before the time of Abraham being chosen to kind of establish these special group of people under God. So these would have been all the other followers of all the various kind of sects and cults that you see kind of throughout the Bible. So, I thought it'd be worth, at the very least, mentioning. So we often hear the word, pagan, and I think pagan probably brings something to people's mind, and I think, as I've kind of been reading recently, paganism is actually a thing on the rise, and people are actually starting to willfully identify as a pagan. But if you go look in the dictionary for the word pagan, it can mean, they give a number of almost kind of seemingly contradictory definitions sometimes. But in essence, the context in which that we're kind of seeing and speaking about it today is essentially a pagan is someone who does not follow the one true God. It will be, those who are, idol worshiping and, doing essentially anything but what God has called us to do. So that's kind of the underlying context here. And it's kind of important to note that God is incredibly clear on his reasoning for condemnation. He doesn't just leave it with, I don't like sin, and that's it. He specifically tells us why. And it's another thing that to remember that whenever, and especially, I'll touch on this, but, especially when we speak about the wrath of God, and, the Bible uses a lot of, sometimes intense verbiage of how much God hates this and hates that and despises this. But it's important to note that God does not despise man. God despises the wickedness and the sinfulness of man. God loves man very much. It is the sin that he despises.
Yes.
So, kind of first thing then, before actually going into the reasons, at the very beginning of verse 18, we see for the wrath of God. And quite oftentimes, people don't like talking about the wrath of God. It's people almost think it contradictory of, as Christians, we would certainly say that we have an all-loving God. God certainly loves everyone. How then cannot God also be a God of wrath? But one thing that people need to keep in mind is that love and righteous being the key word here, righteous wrath and judgment, are the whole package. You cannot have a truly loving God without one who is also capable of righteous judgment on people, which is what we're going to see here. So that's kind of the underlying context of what we're kind of seeing here today. So I'll just reread verse 18. So we see, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. So, reason number one, it's the suppressing of God's truth. And the key thing to know here, I think, is the word suppress. So, one thing I think to always make sure that people remember is that this was not a case of people not knowing the truth. And people going, oh, well, I had no reason, I had no way of knowing, I was ignorant. People knew the truth. However, they willingly chose to ignore it. Another way that you can think of suppressing the truth, because at the end of the day, if people don't want the truth, what do? They have to have something, so they'll exchange it for a lie, essentially. They will try to create their own truth, which is, how many times do you hear today, I'm living my own truth, I'm living my own way. You hear a lot about, this whole idea of, someone's lived experience is actually all that matters, and people are treating truth as subjective. It is all down to the individual, and as long as you are living it sincerely in your own mind, that makes it just as good as anyone else's. Again, this was not ignorance. People know what they're doing. People know what they're doing. We can never chalk this up as ignorance. So, kind of a couple of interesting tidbits. So, what are some examples about how this could happen? I think it's easy to say, okay, we have 4, 5, 6 words there of who suppresses the truth and unrighteousness, but let's unpack that a little bit. So, some examples, probably one of the easiest ones to think about. So if we see the Pharisees in the Bible, you know, they were essentially meant to be the holders of the word, but what did we see them do instead? They got caught up in their rituals and rules, and they got caught up in the context and forgot about God and forgot about what it was all meant to really be about. In the kind of shifting over to more recent times, don't know if anyone saw this. I did see this on the news when it first came out. Don't know if anyone else saw this. In the 2021 census of England and Wales, does anyone know where I'm going with this? Okay, Carol does? Okay. For the first time ever in the history of the census, for the first time ever, less than 50% of the people identified as Christians. I think it was 46, 47%. 48, yeah, something like that. It was only just tipped under, but in 2011, it was 59%. So that's 11% drop in 10, 12 years, roughly. So, you know, this is not a case of everyone has forgotten, everyone no longer knows. This is people choosing to not identify with the truth. This is a choice that people are making. This is people actively suppressing the truth. There's a minister in the States, goes by the name of Tim Keller. He runs a church in, well, man, not running, New York? Yeah, New York. But you know, he's done a lot of books and everything like that. So, and he actually did a couple talks at Google, believe it or not. They actually have some speakers come in and talk about various bits. He did one in 2008 and 2016. And it was interesting. I was watching a clip of the one in 2016, and I think what we often hear, and he actually quoted a few surveys that I can't remember, and some kind of statistics and projections. But I think, especially when we sometimes see, you know, around us immediately, we would think that, oh, you know, faith is shrinking. Everyone's turning away from the faith. Everyone's, you know, the whole world is becoming more secular. When in actuality, that's incorrect. The world in general is actually increasing in religion, is increasing in faith. Now, it may be true that there are certain areas is growing more secular, but however, you know, he actually said that, you know, especially in the next 30 to 50 years, it's actually projected to increase the amount of people who would identify as Christians or Muslims or, you know, a number of different other things. So, yeah, that's kind of like a side note, but kind of a little interesting tidbit. And when we kind of talk about this exchanging of the truth, so we have the truth being what God tells us here, but when people make the choice of, no, I don't want that, I want my own thing, what can my own thing possibly be? Could it be money? Could it be power? Could it be status? Could it be social media likes, which possibly may tie into the status? I mean, you know, how many times have you often, you know, thought about or heard about any one of those things becoming a religion? You know, because at the end of the day, the thing you value most in life tends to be what you worship. If you value most in life the amount of zeros or the number of digits in your bank account, if you value your position at work or your job or your title or how many positive things people say about you on Facebook, you can turn any number of those things into its own religion. You can worship any of those things, and that becomes the lie that you have exchanged God's truth for. So, reason number two. So reason number two is kind of encapsulated in verses 19 and 20. So what it says, because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Now, we read the New King James Version here. In, I think the NIV, it uses the word plain instead of being understood, I think. I may need to be fact checked on that. But, yeah. there you go. Carol's fact checking me here. So, what's the most blatant thing that it says here? So, the first thing that it kind of points out to is that this declares that knowledge concerning God is available to absolutely everyone. And it kind of ties in once again of people are without excuse. It kind of even repeats that. It says, oh, it is plain in the NIV. It is understood here. People are without an excuse. No one can say that they do not know. I had, a little bit of a thought about this, and in the little commentary that I was reading, it was interesting to read, is that they kind of made the point that this, what's called natural revelation, it's the idea of when you see the created world, you cannot, there is no plausible deniability for going, oh, look at how incredible the world is. Isn't evolution great? Wasn't the Big Bang great for doing all this? It's not plausible. It's not plausible. You do not have any real reason to go down that road, and in a minute I'll kind of say why. So yeah, this whole natural revelation points you to God. All of creation points you to God. Now, it's not to say, in the issue of kind of salvation through Christ, missionaries are still very important. That's not to say that no one needs missionaries. Eric would be out of a job if no one needed missionaries, so it's still incredibly important. But the kind of key thing that leads on from kind of reason number one, the suppression of truth, is that if you suppress the truth, you're going to read false flags in this revelation that you see around us. You are going to ignore this clear revelation that we see here, and you're going to draw a completely and totally incorrect picture. It's if you're working through a math problem and you make a mistake part of the way through it, that's going to be tainted. Your whole answer at the end is going to be tainted, and you're going to be making mistakes every step of the way if your initial starting point is incorrect. So again, the proof is there. The proof is there. No one could say otherwise. So I actually have one of Tim Keller's books, and it's called Reason for God. Very good. If anyone wants to read it, I'm not getting commission from this. But in terms of why people would not believe, he kind of mentions in the very beginning. So he states kind of three particular reasons. You have the intellectual, the personal, and the social side of things. And I won't get deep into all three, but what he kind of states is that no one for intellectual reasons alone could ever really state, okay, I've weighed up all the facts, all the evidence, and I can state categorically that my only reasoning for not believing in God is the intellectual, logical, rational based side of things. And what he says that this is always tainted by the personal side of things. People always have an underlying reason for why they don't want to believe. So, possible examples of this, we've all heard about, and a lot of us have experienced kind of personal tragedies that we can't reconcile with there being a loving God. Why would a loving God allow X to happen? I work with, so I'm a software engineer, I work with a lot of incredibly intelligent people. And I've had kind of small discussions with them before. And the amount of times I've heard, well, church is fine for women and children, but I'm too clever for that. It's just silly. It's just silly. I'm far too smart for that. People don't want there to be a God, because there being God would communicate some sort of ultimate accountability in the end. There being some ultimate justice and ultimate judgment that people just don't want. People don't want. They want to make their time on earth as best they can, and they accept that. They accept that. So they could simply not want it. And at the end of the day, you could see something right in front of you. However, if you don't want to see it, you're not going to see it. Doesn't matter how plain it is. People have this choice. People have the choice to see or not see. And then what's mentioned is these invisible qualities. These invisible qualities. So invisible to the naked eye. We can't. So implying that we can't see them. However, what can we see? We can see the effects of them. We can't see. You can't see the wind, but you can sure feel it. I don't know, has anyone been out when it's been gusty recently and everything like that? I know, our house is kind of in a little bit of a wind tunnel because we live on the edge of kind of the canal area that goes through the new build area. And I'm telling you, there have been some nights where it feels like the house is being knocked down by the wind. So this whole business of invisible qualities, that does not mean that you can't see them, because you can see the effects of them which prove them. So again, it's whenever you see these repeated points, these repeated words, you kind of know you're onto something at that point. This is clearly something important. Clearly something important. So, kind of reason number 3 that this kind of leads on to. So we're looking at verses 21 to 23 at this point. So verse 20 ends with, so that they are without excuse. And then we go on to verse 21. Because, although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. So what we call this is we're perverting God's glory here. We are taking essentially what God has given us, and we're using it for our own reasons, for our own good, our own gain, what we want to do with it. So, this last link in the chain, so like I said, is to use and build on top of the knowledge from the exchanged lie to then pervert what God has given us. So, and the bit where it says, let me scroll back through. So yeah, because although they knew God, so that bit, although they knew God, this was, it does not say, oh, they kind of had an idea about God. They guessed God. They estimated God. No, they knew God. And this refers to kind of the experiential knowledge that the likes of Adam and Eve had. Where they actually walked with God and knew him even after the fall as well. So this is personal experience. This was not kind of the invisible qualities. These were things that were made blindingly obvious. So it kind of almost begs the question, how did we get from knowing something as an indisputable fact to then corrupting that and intentionally going away for it? Now, it doesn't say how long it took from Adam and Eve to this perversion of God's glory or anything like that. We're not given an exact time frame, but the fact remains that it's an act of open, willful rebellion. It's people knew, but they chose to go away from it anyway. And it's kind of, that's what makes it all the worse. It's you could probably say some things that people could claim ignorance for in the world today. If you truly do not know something and if you make a mistake because you truly don't know something, you are not exempt from the consequences of that mistake, but you could at the very least claim ignorance in some things. This is not one of those situations. This is not one of those situations. So, what we have then is kind of this net negative effect, this overall negative effect of this perverting of God's glory. So what are the kind of things that we see here? So they became futile in their thoughts. So what does that kind of mean? So futile thoughts, worthless thoughts, purposeless thoughts. How many times today do we hear about people searching for purpose in life, and people desperate to find purpose and meaning in life, and they just simply don't know what to do. They don't know who to listen to. They're confused. They're confused, and what is that is the result of people essentially chasing this elusive subjective truth that we kind of see in the first reason. People want to do what they want to do, but they're unhappy with the road that ultimately leads them down. And then we see some foolish hearts were darkened. Foolish hearts were darkened. And the thing that kind of points out to me is, when you choose to believe something, and you become entrenched in this, it's quicksand, isn't it? It's difficult to turn yourself around. The further you go down a road, it takes that much longer to get back to it. And when the truth is rejected, in time, the ability to recognize the truth is impaired. So that even when you do see it right in front of you, you either don't care or you ignore it. You choose not to see it. So again, this is the inevitable result here. And then professing to be wise, they became fools. In some of the Bible studies that we've done, we kind of went through Proverbs a little bit, and for anyone who's read Proverbs, it deals a lot with fools and foolishness. And one of the things that it says is, the fools are often the ones most quick to call themselves wise. They're the ones spouting their mouths off and trying to convince everyone and things like that. So, that's again when people become convinced of their own truth, which is in fact a lie, they're going to try and propagate that. And then lastly, when we kind of see they change the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man. So idolatry. And key thing to remember is, the only form of idolatry is not just a gold calf, a gold statue, or whatever they chose to make it from. That is not the only form of idolatry. You can worship absolutely anything as an idol. I remember at mine and Bethany's wedding, Eric came and very graciously spoke for us there, and he kind of gave us a list of things to watch out for, and kind of things to watch out for. And I remember very, very clearly that one of those things, and of course, take this in all the context, but you have to be careful not to worship church. Because at the end of the day, church is not something to worship. Church is a channel with which to worship God. So idolatry is not just a golden statue. If you have your Bibles, could you turn with me to, we're going to Isaiah 44. I'll give you all a minute to get there. Scroll through a list here. So Isaiah 44, and the whole passage is verses 8 through 20, but I'm just going to quickly read for us verses 13 through 20. And what it's talking about here is the foolishness of idolatry, and what I would kind of even go further is and say is the ultimate irony of worshiping idols. The irony of worshiping idols. So we start out in verse 13, and it says, "The craftsman stretches out his rule. He marks one out with chalk. He fashions it into a plane. He marks it out with the compass and makes it like the figure of a man, according to the beauty of a man, that it may remain in the house. He cuts down cedars for himself and takes the cypress and the oak. He secures it for himself among the trees of the forest. He plants a pine, and the rain nourishes it. Then it shall be for a man to burn, for he will take some of it and warm himself. Yes, he kindles it and bakes bread. Indeed, he makes a god and worships it. He makes it a carved image and falls down to it. He burns half of it in the fire. With this half he eats meat. He roasts a roast and is satisfied. He even warms himself and says, 'Ah, I am warm. I have seen the fire.' And the rest of it he makes into a god, his carved image. He falls down before it and worships it, prays to it and says, 'Deliver me, for you are my God.' They do not know nor understand, for he has shut their eyes so they cannot see, and their hearts so that they cannot understand. And no one considers in his heart, nor is there knowledge nor understanding to say, 'I have burned half of it in the fire. Yes, I have also baked bread on its coals. I have roasted meat and eaten it. And shall I make the rest of it an abomination? Shall I fall down before a block of wood?' He feeds on ashes. A deceived heart has turned him aside. And he cannot deliver his soul, nor say, 'Is there not a lie in my right hand?'" So the ultimate point here is that look at this situation. Look at this situation. You're worshiping the same thing that you just got done burning in a fire. It's the same thing that you just used to cook your meat, to cook your bread, to warm yourself. And just having destroyed it, you are now falling down to it and worshiping it and asking it for a salvation. So that's what I'd like to call the ultimate irony of idolatry. The ultimate irony. It's you can apply that to anything. You can say, at the end of the day, how many times, if you worship your money, how many times have we seen, people lose everything. People lose everything. You can so easily lose your money, your status, your power, your following on social media, anything like that. Anything like that. It is the ultimate irony, is the ultimate foolishness to worship such a fleeting thing, such a fleeting and valueless thing at the end of the day. So those are our three reasons. Those are our three reasons. So we had suppression of God's truth, we had the ignoring of the revelation, and we had the perverting of God's glory. So what are the ultimate results of all these? Let me just swap back over to Romans. So I've got that. Here we go. So, in a real sense, the results of God's condemnation on the rebellious humanity are the natural consequences of suppressing the truth and ignoring the revelation and perverting God's glory. However, what we kind of see there in in verses 24 and 25 is, so therefore God also gave them up to uncleanliness in the lusts of their hearts to dishonor their bodies among themselves, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie, and worship and serve the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. So this was, it's almost one step further than people just reaping what they sow. This was God actually did not stop them. At the end of the day, God gave us free will, and we are not puppets on a string for God to force us to do things. And, especially where it says in the end, serve the creature rather than the Creator. When Adam and Eve were first created, they were given dominion over creation. We were put here as the keepers of it all. And how perverse is it that we then turned it on its head and actually serve creation rather than the other way around. Believe it or not, just this morning, I was doing, Bethany had a great little intro for what she was thinking about over here. And some fantastic, inspiring things. On the way over here, I was thinking about, man, I hope this goes well. Not near as inspiring. However, I was hyping myself up this morning, and Bethany came in and she said, "Oh, I've got something that maybe you can use in the sermon." And I was like, "All right, I don't like changing things so last minute." So I was like, "All right, well, what is it?" But it turned out to be great. I say great in loosest sense. So we're talking about how Adam and Eve were originally put here to have dominion over creation. The Exeter Cathedral tweeted something about this art expedition that they've opened. And from what I understood, it's Bethany may know more, but literally it's in the Exeter Cathedral, and it's this art show of has the Earth. It's like some big 7-meter Earth globe type thing. And that in itself is not a bad thing. But the title of the exhibition is called Gaia. Don't know if anyone knows. So Gaia, you get apps like Gaia GPS, things like that. It kind of refers to the Earth. However, the original Greek word Gaia actually refers to the goddess of the Earth. And that's what people gave. So we heard things like Mother Earth and things like that. People, the Greeks would worship Gaia as the goddess of the Earth. So they did not treat it like a created reality from God. They actually worshipped the Earth itself. So the second I saw that, just can understand from one particular perspective, you could say it was innocent enough that this church, that the cathedral could have this art exhibition in it. And I'm sure it looked fantastic, but it's the turning around of how God originally intended to be, and it is that ultimate perversion of God's glory, the idea of worshiping earth rather than giving the glory to God. There's I do like my books. Everyone I'm sure knows who C.S. Lewis is, and my favorite book is a C.S. Lewis book. It's called The Great Divorce. Has anyone heard of? No, it's probably not his most well-known one, but The Great Divorce is a book about the separation of people's personal sinful desires with the reality of heaven. And the whole book goes through this. So it's an analogy. So C.S. Lewis paints this picture and he actually puts a note in the very beginning, stating that it's an allegory, and in no way, shape, or form should people take this to be a factual description of what heaven may be like. And he warns people about this, because he does allegory incredibly well, and it's incredibly easy to take that kind of thing and go, wow, that's how heaven will be. So, take that as it's meant to be taken, is all he's saying. And the whole book is more or less a series of conversations with what's called ghosts, essentially those who have died on earth, and they visit what he kind of paints out to be the footstep of heaven. So you're not in heaven, but it's the footstep of heaven. And you have those in heaven coming down to meet and talk with the ghosts that have come up. And the spirits from heaven are essentially trying to convince them to leave what they have behind and give the glory to God and put God on top. Because the title of the book, The Great Divorce, is meant to... he mentions at the very beginning of the book that William Blake, I think it was, wrote about the marriage of heaven and hell, and his idea was to write a book that would separate the two. So that's kind of the whole thing. And there's one particular conversation in it that really struck me when I was looking into all this stuff. And so the only name that he gives to the ghost is called the Episcopal Ghost. And so that this particular man was presumably either a bishop or an incredibly learned individual within the church. However, the common trend across the conversation is that the ghost makes a big point about, now, we may have held these views about God and believing in Christianity, the one true God, in the very beginning. Now, when we were boys, we believed this. However, when we grew up, we wanted something more. We wanted something different. We didn't want to believe the same things that we believed when we were boys. So he made no effort to retain the truth, exchanged it. Reason number one. He made a point of, they just followed the current trend of intellectual thought. What's the popular idea these days? That's the popular idea. We'll go along with that crowd. We wanted to make sure that as long as an honest and sincerely held, quote, honest and sincerely held viewpoint is just as valid as the truth. Regardless of whether or not it is the truth, as long as it's honest and sincerely held, that's the point. The truth does not matter. It is the sincerity in which the lie is held. That's what matters. So again, ignoring the revelation doesn't matter what the truth is. You're ignoring what you see in front of you. And the conversation kind of goes through where the ghost tried to make demands for getting into heaven. So, I'll come with you to heaven. However, I need to be free to pursue inquiry. I need to be free to have debates with those there about what truth really is and what ideas are actually correct. And the way the Spirit responds to that is, I cannot promise you any of those things because I'm taking you to the land of answers, not questions. And in the end, the ghost chose to leave because, I won't give you the full conversation. The full conversation is 10 pages of the book. But essentially, the ghost leaves because the ghost actually says, the hopeful journey of inquiry is all that matters. And the Spirit replies to that, how on earth can you have, this isn't verbatim, but how on earth can you have a hopeful journey unless there is something at the end to hope for? And that's the hope that we have in Jesus. That's the hope that we have in God. You cannot have You cannot have any kind of hopeful, meaningful journey of inquiry unless you're actually searching for the truth, the correct answer. It can't be done. There has to be objective truth. So what? That was kind of a tough. It paints a bleak picture, doesn't it? We've seen that all these reasons that we've kind of stated, they're links in a chain, and like I said with that math problem, once you start out on that road, the road is mapped out for you. There's no deviating from this road. Everyone's following this same path here when they choose to suppress the truth. Suppressing the truth leads to ignoring the revelation, which leads to perverting what God has given us. So like I said, this paints a bleak picture. But isn't it great that we have hope?
Yes.
Isn't it great? Because probably one of the most well-known verses in the entire Bible. John 3:16 says that for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. Now, we all obviously know what Jesus did for us on the cross, the brutality in which he died for us. This is not a God who despises humanity. This is a God who despises the sinfulness of humanity so much that he will do literally everything and anything to save us from it. And that is a God who is capable of incredible, immense love and sacrifice.